Sure. So, in DLX, our primary role is to provide connectivity and data mobility in the lab. But we're finding really interesting now that we've got this layer that allows connectivity into the lab. We've been using AI on top of this to be
Hmm.
able to allow a user natural language interface into the lab to create these automations and have visibility into the labs. And that's been really interesting, exploring that space. The other thing, even just on top of our current application, we've been able to use AI to be able to help people configure this connectivity layer, whether it's to
Hmm.
create orchestrations or configure connections.
Hmm.
This using a large language model um, allows us to make it much easier to actually use our current application. So it's been a really interesting experience over the last several months to see the explosion of this. And
Hmm.
once you're connected, you can really exploit a lot of the value out of these large
Hmm.
language models. And then once you've got things connected, yeah, then there's this idea of a natural language interface into your lab. So you could ask
Hmm.
it, what's the status of bioreactor XYZ? It will go out and use DLX to get that information and then answer that user's question with that information we provide, which make
Hmm.
really interesting now to say things like, okay, every 10 minutes, get the status of this bioreactor and let me know if the pH drops below 6.7. Now you have an agent that's going out there, probing, getting data, making some decisions, and helping you execute things in the lab
Hmm.
in a
Hmm.
very natural language sort of interface.
When we talk to our customers about what's the value that you get from implementing DLX in your laboratory, as Jeff said, connecting everything that you have and then automating the data flow between them, we kind of think of five main areas of value creation. One is, believe it or not, even in today's labs, people are still doing manual data transcription and management. So they're literally typing data in between different systems. So obviously, by digitally connecting everything with DLX, you don't have to do that anymore. Everything is automatically moved around. And there's significant value that you unlock there because there's a lot of time associated with doing that. And so there's significant labor savings from that. The second thing that happens when you do manual data management is that people make errors. And the estimate is that about 3 to 5% is the error rate for manual transcriptions and data management. So by
Hmm.
eliminating that, you save time and you also save the expense associated with having to potentially rerun samples because of the errors that result. The third big advantage or the third value lever is the fact that because you eliminating the time from manually manipulating data, your time to result is faster. And so whether you're
Okay.
in a QC laboratory and you're releasing batches, that allows you to do that faster. Or if you're in an R&D environment where you have a project that you need to complete, you can get that project done faster. So that's the value there.
Hmm.
A fourth value lever relates to human capital. One of the things that we hear a lot from our customers is that people that work in the laboratory today tend to be younger and they tend to be digital natives. And so in their personal life, the idea of manually transcribing stuff is unheard of.
Yes.
So when they come into a laboratory environment and they have to do that, they're not very happy. So by bringing DLX into the laboratory, it allows them to free themselves up to do more value-added work. And you can measure that through productivity and retention of staff. And then the
Cool.
fifth one, which finally gets to start to talk a little bit about AI, is that AI and machine learning really rely on context-rich, high-quality, diverse data sets to build them and then to get insights from them. And we believe quite strongly that Scitara DLX is really the ultimate foundation layer to put into the laboratory so that laboratory data results with context can be put into AI
Hmm.
to get those insights. So that's kind of the overall picture
Sure.
of DLX and maybe
Hmm.
touching on AI. And then I think some of the stuff that Jeff mentioned before about how do we make it easier for customers to adopt.
Yeah.
Today with DLX, it requires some level of coding expertise to set up orchestrations. With the things that Jeff's doing with AI, that's no longer required. It makes it much easier to adopt Scitara DLX and take advantage of all the benefits I just stated. Yeah, so when we start talking to customers at the beginning of a potential engagement, usually they have something that they consider to be the center of their laboratory universe. And it's usually, if it's an R&D, it's usually an ELN, whereas if it's in QC, it tends to be a LIMS. And then they have a whole bunch of instruments that they want to connect to those things. Obviously, we can do that very, very easily with a connection technology that Jeff and his team built. But increasingly, what we find is that labs are becoming more and more diverse. So, for example, another important thing that needs to be connected to is a data lake. In that data lake, where oftentimes what we're seeing now is that customers, in addition to putting some of the data into their LIMS or ELN, they also want to put it into a data lake so that they can do analytics and take advantage of AI and machine learning on that. The beauty of the Scitara approach is that we don't really care what the customer wants to connect, because we connect to everything, whether it's instruments, ELNs, LIMS, data lakes. We also get asked about ERPs. So it's the universality of the connectivity that really sets DLX apart.
These large language models, we're finding are extremely intuitive and good at these sort of putting these problem solving steps together. When you ask a large language model, you can give it, this is a list of all the things that are connected and the things that they can do. In a natural language, you can simply ask it to do these things, and it will be able to execute these. But to me, it's a lot of what we're doing with large language models now are augmenting our capabilities. They're really an extension of us to say, do all these things that I would have to do manually in that, and just make it easier to do. Well, so on the security and privacy, I think a lot of us are experimenting with some of the public interfaces, OpenAI and that. And I think there's companies, enterprises have legitimate questions around, even if you're using the API interface, how do we know that the valuable questions and inquiries that our users are submitting aren't being used to further train that model or harvested for other purposes?
Yes.
And so that is a legitimate concern. I think as the industry is maturing, certainly companies like AWS are offering enterprise grade access to large language models in a variety of different ways. But in the extreme case, it is relatively straightforward to host your own private large language model if that's what the enterprise you're working with. So that's, for us, we're sort of, our application is LLM agnostic, and it's sort of whatever the customer wants to choose. A lot of the large language models that we're working with now are very generalized ones. OpenAI, GPT-4, a massive training base. That in the way that we're using it, we actually, when one of our application sends a request to the large language model to answer a user's question, we actually give it prompt instructions to say, don't use your trained knowledge base. When a user asks the question in our interface, a couple things happen. When you set up the interface, you can give it proprietary documentation and knowledge. All your SOPs can be loaded into it. We say, don't use your trained knowledge to answer this question. Use what we're providing. If the answer isn't in what you're providing, don't answer the question. Just say politely, you can't answer the question.
Yes.
So that mechanism gets around a lot of the inherent difficulties you have if you are relying on the trained knowledge of the LLM. It really can't tell whether it knows something or not. It can generate an answer based on its trained knowledge.
Well, we've actually already started to talk to some of our existing customers about this AI assistant. And I think what's fascinating about a tool like this is, as we show this to customers, not surprisingly, they come up with, use cases we hadn't even thought of. We are keen to get this in the hands of at least our existing customers so that they can start to try it, provide us feedback, and that's going to guide us with regard to our commercialization strategy. So it's super exciting. There's a lot of possibilities. But it's one of those technologies where I think we want to get it into our customers' hands so they can start to teach us about how it can be used to improve their productivity.